Well, Leviton has done it again and have upgraded the DIY approach to installing receptacles and light switches. They still utilize the same DIY-friendly levers to make the connections a lot easier, but they significantly upgraded these from their previous models. So we're gonna get into all that in this video. We're gonna go over each one of the different models, what they have to offer, and then most importantly, we're gonna talk about what makes these so much better and why this really could be a really big deal for homeowners and DIYers out there. So let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, so as you can see, for the most part, these are the majority of the models that Leviton has come out with that have the lever connectors built into the switches and receptacles. These two up here are the older models. These are the Decora Edge models. As you can see, they're both in Decora style, but for the most part, all they had was the switches and the one receptacle. But as you can see, they didn't have as many models as they do now. Now they did have a three-way switch as well that I don't have pictured here, but this new Lever Edge model comes with all of that and then more. But before we get into all of this, like always, I just want to be transparent with you all. This is not a sponsored video. I have never talked to Leviton. I'm not paid. These were not sent to me for free. I bought them with my own money. All right, so now that that's out of the way, for those of you that do not have experience with these, with the lever connections in these different models, just really quickly, what makes these so much different than say your standard receptacle is if we turn these onto the side, as you can see on our standard receptacle, we have our terminal screws. Everybody knows about those. But on all these other models down here, we have lever connectors on them. So normally, as many of you know, we'd have to make our wires up with J-hooks on our standard receptacles or switches, wrap them around in a clockwise direction, and tighten them down. What a lot of people don't realize is, while this is a pretty easy thing to do, there are still a lot of mistakes that can be made when doing this, and we made plenty of videos about that on the channel that if you want to check out to see what those are and see if you're doing those, you can check those out. Whereas on these, we don't need to worry about those terminal screws. Everything is also color coded, so on this receptacle, we got two black levers, which are obviously for hot, two white levers, which are for neutral, and then the green down here for the ground. So it makes wire placement a lot more obvious. And of course, since it has these levers on here, which if you're familiar with the Wago connectors, it's very, very similar. But these actually, I found these to be quite good, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But because of these lever connectors, it makes installing these not only easier in that you know exactly where everything's gonna go, but way, way faster. So once you've got your wires stripped, it's really as quick and easy as this. We'll flip up our green ground first, take our ground wire, insert it into the hole, push that lever down, it's locked into place. Next, we'll flip up this white neutral wire lever, take our white neutral wire, insert it into the hole, push it down in there, flip that lever down, now it's in place. Then just flip up our black lever for our hot, take our black wire or our hot line wire, insert it into the hole there, and then flip that lever down, and now they're all locked into place. So as you can see, way, way faster to install as well. And it's for those reasons that these are becoming so much more popular amongst your homeowners and DIYers. But now let's go through the different models, what they have to offer, and how they compare to the older Decora Edges. As I said earlier, they all have the levers on them, so they all have that the same. But on our new Lever Edge models, we have a lot of different models to pick from. The light switch, for instance, is a 15 or 20 amp light switch. Then we've got these two receptacles here. This is a 15 amp and this is a 20 amp. Now this particular 15 amp receptacle is not tamper resistant. They do have a tamper resistant model that I just don't have on camera here, but it does exist. Everything else about it is the same. And again, as you can see, it is more of your standard looking receptacle, as opposed to your Decora style receptacle that is completely flat. And again, they also have a 20 amp version as well. Also, on these receptacles, you can still make them switched receptacles. You would just have to break that little plastic piece off in the middle, and then underneath of there is the piece of metal that then you would also have to snap off that are on either side of the receptacle in order to make it a switched receptacle if you're wanting to run the top outlet using a light switch. So they do have that capability as well. But one of the big differences comes down to this right here. As you can see, this is a 15 amp tamper resistant GFCI receptacle. Before, they did not have the GFCI receptacles with the lever connections on the side. So this introduction is a pretty big deal in that there is now an availability of a very DIY friendly GFCI receptacle. Same thing as all the other devices where it has the levers on the side with the corresponding wires. Now the blue designates the load wire, which would go onto your other receptacles down the line, so making sure that everything is wired up properly. They also, just like your standard GFCIs, also have the same locations or words on them describing where each wire goes. Something else that is really cool about these receptacles is they also have test ports on each side of the GFCI where you can put a probe in and take your measurements using a multimeter. So they have your more standard model like this one here. And then in this box, I've also got, it's the same thing, but it's also weather resistant. This is made for more of your outdoor purposes if you need receptacles outside or in wet environments considered as your basement, garage, things of that nature. Weather resistant is a lot of times the way to go. One thing that I do really like, especially for the DIYers with these, is with the levers, when you have that lever up and then you insert your wire, when you go to flip down that lever, it makes that audible click. It's letting you know that you are going to have a good connection, everything is connected properly, and it's just as easy as that, and there's really no second guessing your connection, as long as the proper amount of insulation was removed from the wire. And if you don't know how much insulation should be removed from the wire for these receptacles or any receptacles, there is a strip gauge over here on the bottom left. You put your wire up in there and it'll let you know exactly how much copper needs to be exposed. Another great thing about all of these different models is in some ways they are a lot safer. And that is in that we do not have any exposed metal parts. So everything on these newer receptacles and switches, it's all internal. Whereas on your older receptacles and switches, you have your terminal screws. And while they shouldn't usually cause you an issue, there are times where that exposed metal can cause an issue in a box, especially on a poorer installation. But again, with these newer models, you don't have to worry about that at all. So that is a huge safety feature that is included with this easier design. But I think what is probably the most exciting thing about this newer model, as opposed to the Decora Edges that they originally came out with, is while these are still very serviceable, I've actually installed these in a few places in my home, lower amperage situation type areas. These newer models have been really beefed up. And as soon as you hold these in your hand, if you were to compare the Decora Edge to these newer lever edges, and you can do this in the store as well, just take them out of the box, hold them next to each other. The new lever edges weigh quite a bit more. And there's a reason for that. One of the things that I really wanted to see done differently in the future was seeing more of a commercial grade receptacle. A commercial grade receptacle is just made with beefier parts. The metal's a lot better, a lot stronger, thicker. All of the components are just made a lot better. And that's what they've done with these new lever edges. If we just take a look at the box here of the new lever edge, you'll see where it says Leviton Plus. And a lot of times whenever you see the plus on your Leviton boxes, that is letting you know that that is a commercial grade receptacle. And that's exactly what these are. So I've already gone over how the components inside are a lot stronger than the older Decora Edge models. And not just the Decora Edges, but your standard residential grade receptacles. The internals of these new lever edges are much better than the internals of these old residential receptacles and switches. And the same thing goes for these new light switches as well. One thing that I do know about these 15 amp models is the components in the 15 amp model are pretty much the exact same as the 20 amp model. So your 15 amp receptacle, with it having a lot of the same components as the 20 amp, that just lets you know that these are more than capable of handling the current on those 15 amp circuits. And the same thing goes for the light switch. This is also a commercial grade light switch. The internals on this are beefed up in comparison with your standard residential grade light switch, and is just made overall with a lot more quality. Even the switch, when you flip the switch, you can just feel the quality difference between this and your standard residential grade light switch. So with the internals on all of these being upgraded to the commercial grade specs, this is a huge deal to me, and actually something I'm a little bit excited about, because I've always liked the functionality and the ease of use of these newer receptacles and switches. But for me personally, I just wanted to see a version that had commercial grade, because it's just gonna make everything last longer and just be a whole lot safer. So to me, that is a huge deal with these newer receptacles and switches in comparison with the older models. The one thing I noticed on these newer receptacles and switches when I went to the levers is they do have a slight bit of play there, but I'm telling you, it takes quite a bit of force to lift that lever up. In my opinion, it would be very difficult to accidentally flip the lever up on these, whereas the Wagos, I think they've gotten better, but the Wagos and other devices like them, it's not nearly as difficult to lift that lever up. These levers seem to have quite a bit more tension on them, which is probably why when you flip them down, they make that really loud audible click. The other thing is the direction of the levers when you're pushing this in, it's not going to get caught on anything because the levers are pointed out. So that's not really a concern in my opinion, as I don't think that these can get hung up on anything to begin with. So I've been really looking at these coming from a standpoint of a DIYer, but how can these be an advantage for professionals? But well, one of the big things is time savings. Time is money, especially for the trades. Electricians are no different. The faster they can get jobs done, the faster they can get paid and move on to the next one. Speed oftentimes does come with a price though. The faster somebody goes, the more mistakes can be made. That more so comes into play on your standard receptacles and switches, just because you have more possible failure points or just not using good techniques to make sure that it's a superior connection. Whereas with these, they're very consistent, snap open, snap closed. And again, as long as the proper amount of insulation is removed and that lever is flipped down, it's good to go. So time and cost savings are a big one for professionals, but because these are so easy to use for anyone, there's a reduced likelihood of installation errors, warranty issues, or even insurance issues. Another great thing about all of these is they are compatible with both stranded and solid copper wire. And then the last really big advantage for really not even just professionals, but even homeowners that know what they're doing, is a lot of these have built-in circuit testing openings. So we talked about it over here on the GFCI. That's what these holes are here for. That's so you can test your circuit using a multimeter. Well, even the switches have test holes or ports on them so that you can test that circuit. You can test the device and do some of your troubleshooting that way, as opposed to disconnecting everything. And it's also a lot safer to be able to do it this way because again, the wires are not exposed at all on the outsides like your old receptacles and light switches. Everything is internal. So it's a lot better, more efficient and safer way to be able to test those circuits and devices. But again, since this channel is DIY focused, these new receptacles and switches are also DIY focused. Just a really quick recap why DIYers might be more interested in these is these are just a more approachable way to tackle electrical projects. You can have a lot more confidence in achieving a secure connection. And also for you, these are compatible with both the stranded and solid copper wires. So what is my personal opinion on all these devices here? Well, looking back at the older Decora Edges, I still don't really have an issue with these. Again, I've used some of these in my own home, but I was a little bit more selective in where I was putting them just because I'm just not a big fan of the internals being truly lightweight residential grade. These are all UL listed, so they've gone through all the rigorous testing. So for me personally, I see no issue with using the Decora Edges in lower amperage situations. But when we get to the newer models, again, I'm a little bit excited about them because I do love the ease and DIY friendliness that all of these have to offer. I think the connections that are made, they're so much faster, easier, and they're still very good connections. But now that they've upgraded the internals of these to commercial grade, I will absolutely be using more of these in my installs just because of how easy they are to use. Again, I do still think that your standard terminal screw connection is about as good as it can get, but these come with so many more added benefits that it kind of influences the scale in a direction of I'd almost still rather use these because of the functionality, what they have to offer inside. And I'm personally not really concerned about the connections that are made there. I know that it's making good connection, using it basically like a spring-loaded vise. So I don't really have any qualms about that. I really, really like these new GFCIs, the ease of use, the being able to test them in numerous different ways. And again, like on all of them, I just really think it's smart with all the different color coding to let you know on top of the words to let you know exactly where everything goes. So in my opinion, I personally really do recommend, especially these newer lever edges. I will definitely be using them myself, but I just wanted to do a really quick video letting you all know about these, as these are brand new. They're not widely available yet, but it's just a matter of time. Pretty quickly, these are gonna be very widely available on places like Amazon as well. And like always, for your convenience, I'll have links for everything you saw in this video, from all the different receptacles and switches we talked about, to even the tools that we used, and different variations of the Wago connectors, where these kind of got their idea from. I'll have links for all of it down in the description down below. When you clicked on those links, it'll take you directly to whatever you clicked on, so you can check it all out for yourself. Hey, really quickly before you go, if you found value in this video, then you're definitely gonna find value in some videos I did in the past, where if you're still wanting to use some of your more standard receptacles, because there's really nothing wrong with those either, they're just not quite as DIY friendly, but overall still a pretty easy installation, but you're not sure exactly what mistakes can be made and why they're not quite as DIY friendly as the receptacles and switches we talked about in this video, well then I'd invite you to click on one of these two videos right over here, where I go over some of the biggest mistakes a lot of DIYers don't realize they're making when installing receptacles and switches. But I hope that you found value in this video, and if you did, if you could do me a huge favor, hit that thumbs up button right down below, and of course, if you have any questions or comments still, you can leave those down in the comment section. And I'll catch you all in the next one. See ya.